Hey, I'm Ed Bolian from VINwiki, and I am here in downtown Miami at Curated with my good friend John Tamarian. We're shooting a lot of stuff this week, but one of the things that we've been talking about a lot is really trying to nail down the most iconic collector cars with our usual supercar bin from the decades of history. And so today we're going to talk about our top 10 collector cars from the 1980s. As always, John, thank you for being here.
Thank you for joining us in Miami. It's great to have you here for once.
For sure. And so here we're really trying to talk about the most iconic cars, such that 50 years from now, if you heard that so-and-so had like the greatest collection of 1980s cars, this is what you would see when you opened up his garage. And as always, our content would not be possible without our sponsors. And today's video is sponsored by Auto Tempest. If you're looking to track the value of cars over time, there's no better tool than Auto Tempest because the prices from everywhere on the internet come to one place. Their motto is all the cars, one search. It's where I start most of my days, just see if there's any new deals to be shrewdly negotiated on whatever it is that I'm targeting. And I've had more success there of late than I expected to. But thank you to Auto Tempest. Please go check them out at the link in the description below to find your next dream car or to see how close it is to being affordable. But I think the first car is going to be your favorite. So what is your most iconic car of the 1980s?
I don't think you could have a collection of 1980s cars without the right Countach being the centerpiece. I mean, we're talking about a car that transcends automotive in many ways, and really a car that I look at it today as changing the world. I think the Countach has influenced so many collectors, so many entrepreneurs, so many individuals on a scale of, I've said this many times, it's like the object of aspiration. I know so many clients and enthusiasts I've talked to over the years that they ended up going to college or going to start a business or doing all these things because they had a Countach on their wall as a kid. And I think, again, one of the reasons that Enzo Ferrari, told his engineers to go build the world's greatest car with the F40 was the Countach.
Clearly.
So I think you think of the context in terms of magazine covers, posters, toy models, trapper keepers, all these different things. The Countach, to me, is the most iconic car of its time.
Agreed. Now, obviously, the production began in the 1970s, but they weren't officially U.S. legal until the 80s, and so I think they're most iconic as an 80s car. Also, I love the Porsche 959 here. I think, in terms of, it was really the first halo car of road-going Porsches, even though it was never supposed to be that much of a road-going Porsche, but the Group B heritage, Paris Dakar, everything that the 959 did and how it paved the way for them to stretch value-wise into the Carrera GT, into the 918, I think it just started something magical.
Agreed, and I think the amount of technology, I mean, the car was groundbreaking and with the suspension and all these different things of its time. So again, it is an icon of this shift in technology, the whole concept of supercars, flagship cars. You have to have a 959.
No question. Of course, supercars of the 80s was all about Ferrari. And so there's three here that I love. You got the 288, you've got the F40, and you've got the Testarossa. I think they're all wonderful examples, so iconic as 80s cars. I think the F40 remains the halo car, even though the 288 probably exit out value-wise. But those all paved the way in so many ways for how the brand and how the industry was going to evolve.
I mean, their entire industry of supercars today is based around those cars. And I think, again, the buyers today were inspired by the F40, the Testarossa, and those cars. And I always look at the impact, when you think of there's so many young collectors today and young generation that come to us and say, I have to own either an F40 or a Testarossa. And I just see that forever, sort of being part of the mindset and passion of collectors and enthusiasts.
Absolutely. Now, it wouldn't be a thing to say that the 80s were the peak of cars for America or Japan, and so most of our cars here are European, but there are two American cars that I think belong squarely on this list. Now, they're not the most American examples, but let's just say the Vector W8 and the DeLorean DMC-12. I know you've got a Vector downstairs.
I am, you know what, I think the W8, again, it's a car that was so shocking. This shift in technology, I think Gerald Weigert was truly whatever stories you've heard about him, he was definitely a dreamer. And through magazines and different things like that, good and bad, he generated a ton of press, a ton of buzz for a very, very small manufacturer And I think so many people, because the Vector was so shocking, the price point was so high, the potential performance figures, whether they were achieved or not, were so outlandish that it does have such an impact on the 1980s, the Rising Sun movies, all these different things. And then obviously the DeLorean is, I mean, Back to the Future and all these different things was such an important part of pop culture and everything excessiveness about the 80s, and even the story about the founder.
Exactly. Yeah. Again,
smuggling.
craziness and everything that goes with it. And I think both of those cars have so much impact. And I think that's what the 80 cars are all about.
Yes.
Is these are cars that if you pull up at a gas station, if you pull up at a car show, if you are at an intersection, they stop everything.
Yes.
And I mean, today you see a W8 on the road, it will stop time.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we love most about older period cars is their ability to have that emotional effect. Now, 80s was also just a huge moment in modified European car culture. And so the next two, I think, are the Roof CTR and the AMG Hammers. And, we're going to do a lot with Roof this week, and Aloise is coming to town. That's going to be a whole lot of fun. Hopefully she doesn't hate me too much for some previous things that I may or may not.
I was going to bring that up. I was going to.
It is. But I think the first CTR, the Nürburgring videos sliding around, it just doesn't get any cooler.
Well, if you think about that car and the AMG Hammer, especially the road and track shootout test, the cover with the iconic silver AMG Hammer and the yellow roof, that paved the way for all tuners, my belief.
Of course,
forever.
Everybody.
Yeah, and made an impact. You think of AMG today, one of the most important brands and biggest brands in the world would not be where it is without the media, without those sort of shootout tests.
Sure.
Both the roof and the Hammer breaking, kicking the butt of both Ferrari and Lamborghini and the other manufacturers with top speed, horsepower. So I don't think the world would be the same without those two cars in that period, in that time.
Agreed. And, the Hammers in particular, and the roofs certainly, have seen such an explosion in value in recent years. I mean, there are people that spent less than $10,000 on Hammers, on proper US VIN Hammers, less than a decade ago, that are 100x value. And I mean, it's what else has done that? I mean, I guess there was a moment in time where sub $10,000 250 GTOs became right around $1 million cars, probably in a decade.
Well, yeah.
I mean, there were 400,000 on McLaren F1s for a very short time in the early 2000s. One day those are $40 million cars.
Yes.
We're still a ways away from that.
Yeah.
That's not a decade. And so the value explosion and the immediacy of appreciation by collectors of both of these cars, I think, is hugely significant. And so you really just can't go wrong. The next one I put on the list, and I think there's a lot that are kind of on the bubble here, but I put an E30 M3. I don't think BMW as a brand is anything looking like what it is today without the significance and the impact and everything that car was.
I agree. And I think the whole, not so much appreciation in the US, but definitely the DTM series and what it did and the M3's significance. I mean, even look today, there are young collectors. I know a lot of young people, whether it's Kith and all these different brands that are attracted to the M3. There's a young photographer that lives in town. He's like 25 years old, and he has an E30 M3. So I think it's such again, it made such a statement for BMW at the time.
Yep.
And that has transcended how many generations where it's still cool, it's still iconic. And I agree, BMW would not be where it is today without that M3.
So to me, those are the top 10 80s collector cars. There's obviously endless room for discussion and everything else. Cars that I thought certainly merit mention that I know you'll love are an LM002 and a Halpa. And certainly the 930 variants, the slant nose, the speedster, things like that.
Of course, and I would say 930 again, icon, but the LM002 to me, I mean, we would not have super luxury SUVs today if it wasn't for that car. I think you have such a shift in thinking at the time. You think of all the major celebrities that own that car and the impact of that car. So again, the world wouldn't be today where it is without the LM002.
So the 80s were definitely a fulcrum in what cars became, what cars are today. And I know that this dealership wouldn't exist in the form that it is were it not for the significance of these
Yeah.
cars, both for the manufacturers that they represent and the people that are now voting with their checkbooks. And so let us know in the comments what else you think belongs on the top 10 collector car list of the 1980s. We'll be back soon with some other decades to explore, but I hope that you've enjoyed this. And once again, please check out our sponsor, Auto Tempest, at the link in the description below. We can't do this without them, but you can't find your next car without them either. All the cars, one search, Auto Tempest.